authorized media representative for Billy Meier, July 17th, 2015. We're in Kelseyville, California. The topic for today is Where Are You Going, Humanity? And Michael will be happy to have discussion with us and take our questions. Awesome. Come on, Michael. Thank you so much for being with us today.
And that concludes the presentation. The time travel thing, you'll remember it later on. So, I am very happy to be here. Honestly, to see a whole bunch of people coming to hear about the Meier case is always very uplifting for me. So I'm going to actually ask you a couple questions and then we're going to get into this. So how many people don't know who Billy Meier is? Okay, so about half the audience or so. And how many people don't think that there's a possibility that somebody is actually being contacted by extraterrestrials? Okay, good. So here's what I want to put this context. And this, to me, is very important if we're going to be rational about this stuff and not just, go off with tinfoil hats and chasing lights in the sky. You almost wore one. You almost wore a tinfoil hat just for fun. Okay. Of course, there's no loose electricity flying. Here's what I'd like to say. The corroborated, confirmed existence of intelligent extraterrestrial life would be the most important single discovery in all of science and human history, exceeded only by the contact with these supposed extraterrestrial intelligences, okay? I want to set a context. If anybody doesn't agree with that, that's fine. Raise your hand or clarify if it's not clear. In other words, if we really, if science confirmed there was extraterrestrial life, that there were extraterrestrials, and that, advanced technology, and they actually were, flying around and all that stuff, that would be the biggest story in all of human history. We would no longer think of ourselves as alone in the universe. That's an if. And then that is only exceeded by the confirmed, corroborated contact between extraterrestrial life and somebody or bodies on Earth. The way it's presented in our media, the way we get it in our entertainment, and what I call the UFO-CI, UFO community and industry, because it's turned into an industry. Everybody and their brother is meeting with extraterrestrials. They're being abducted, deducted, produced, and whatever else by evil aliens. They're being floated through their walls and windows and whatever. This is taken for granted in this overall context of people who, quote-unquote, believe in UFOs, believe in extraterrestrials and aliens and all that stuff. We're not going to discuss any belief today as being that which supports the information and the authenticity of this case, because this is a huge claim. Obviously, a man in Switzerland has been meeting with human beings from another star system for over 73 years. Really, how come I don't know about it? Why hasn't the president talked about it? Where is all the scientific corroboration and the peer review? Well, the man doesn't have any peers because nobody else is meeting with these people. And I do talk to scientists. I do have scientists that have stepped forward to endorse the authenticity of this case. I'm not going to ask you to believe anything at all, because I don't believe anything. As a matter of fact, I get a little bit of trouble because when I'm interacting with people in different venues, people say, well, I'm a such and such, religion or whatever, or these are my beliefs, and I say, I have absolutely no respect for your beliefs. And I hope you feel the same way about mine if I have any. I want truth, facts, knowledge. Your beliefs, if they work for you, I'm not here to hammer away. I have my own opinions about beliefs. All sorts of beliefs, religions, everything else. And if asked, I'll tell you. If not asked, I probably won't tell you, because it's not about attacking other people's points of view. I only get into that specifically and mainly with people in the so-called UFOCI who make claims about all sorts of stuff and cannot put literally one piece of solid evidence on the table. People have subjective experiences. I don't argue with them. I don't tell them that it isn't what they think it is or what their experience tells them it is, because I'm not that person. There may or may not be satisfactory explanations that people will, say, well, this thing that you say was such and so, what? It could be this. Oh yeah, well, wait a minute. That's not my job either. I don't take people's subjective experiences as fact, meaning something verifiable, objectively. And I have my own subjective experiences, which some of them, one or two I can probably prove, but it's not important. They're mainly going to be anecdotal. So I'm trying to set a little context of what we're really talking about here. So when I start to talk about this man and his evidence and his experiences and information, I'm going to tell you that you are able, if you want, to go ahead and research, investigate, and determine the truth of it for yourself. We're going to look with this question, where are you going, humanity? We're really looking at what is the reason, if this is true, what's the reason for it? Why would an advanced race, now assuming that they exist, make contact with anybody on Earth? If we think about it for a moment, and there's some people, there's some subsets here of considerations, there's nothing in it for an advanced race to come here and to start mingling, interacting, visiting, let alone working for the U.S. government in the desert underneath Area 51. And the little gray aliens are carrying their lunch trays around. No, it isn't happening. There's no logic to it. And we have to realize that when we start to look into this information, logic, oh my gosh, it's one of the core elements of this case. And that means that we can determine, we can work out in our own consciousness an awful lot about the information here, what does or doesn't make sense to you, and how you can test it for yourself. So I'm setting a context because I don't want this to all be predicated on belief. I don't, and it's like also that when we get into questions and answers, a lot of the times in UFO related things, somebody will either live or on the phone or something. Well, in 1971, I was driving down the highway, and I can't do anything with that. I'm not going to tell people that they didn't have it. I've had 7 sightings. I only am convinced that one of them was extraterrestrial nature because most of the objects that are unidentified that are seen in the skies are secret military. And that has been going on since the 20s, not just for this country. I'm going to use this caveat so you understand where I come from. According to the information in this case, there's some things that I state that the evidence has compelled me to say I can prove it as well as anybody can prove anything to anybody else. If you're in a jury, courtroom, the attorneys present evidence, right? And then it's up to each of the 9 or 12 people or whatever to weigh that evidence. And you know that not every jury is unanimous. People hold up and say, well, I don't care if the other 8 people, 10 people, whatever, I don't buy it. I'm just not, it's going to be 11 to 1 or 8 to 1 or whatever. So this is where, what is proof? People say, well, if I see it with my own eyes, then I'll know it's real. If you see it with your own eyes, you're going to know that you saw something with your own eyes. You may not know what it is. And that doesn't just relate to UFOs. We know that in all sorts of contexts and cases, in eyewitnesses of many different things, 3 people, 5 people, 10 people witnessing the same thing. It's a famous Japanese movie about that. It's all the points of view of the same incident. So we want to start zeroing in on how do I determine what works. Part of what will also be helpful for those people who wish to do it is in reading what is actually the core of this case. So let me explain that. I consider the first element here, the first evidence, you would call it, would be the eye candy. That would be the UFOs, the phenomenon. Other parts of this first standard of evidence group are other elements of the physical nature, the metal samples, sound recordings, etc., etc., etc. There's all this stuff, right? That's step one in terms of evidence. Everybody, by the way, all that evidence has been analyzed and actually authenticated by independent experts who are not in the UFO field. And we can get into it. There's plenty on that, free information on the website, cover it in films and stuff. Second element, and this becomes, for me, a higher standard of proof. And that is that this man, Billy Edward Albert Meier, has published since he's 14 years of age, 1951, specific information covering, well, he's the first person to call out unnatural man-made climate change when he was 14 in 1951, foretelling the environmental stresses, destruction, and disasters. In 58, he foretells, he calls it unnatural climbing, global warming, along with the other manifestations, which include cold, blizzards, ice, because these things are cycles. And so if you have an extreme movement towards something else, then in the cycle it's going to go the other direction. He's 14, he's 21, and he's foretelling specific things pertaining to the environment, pertaining to world events. In 1958, he writes that the Berlin Wall is going to fall, in the next decade, whatever he said. But in the same paragraph, he says, the United States of America will have two wars with Iraq, called the U.S.-Iraq Gulf Wars. The second war will be led by a president who's the son of a former president. It will lead to an unbelievable disaster of terrorism. The son of a former president, in 1958, neither of the Bushes were yet presidents. He names AIDS by name, portable telephones, plastic bank cards, the meth epidemic. There's 162 different things there, one of which in there says, as retribution for the Christian crusade centuries ago, there will be worldwide radical Islamic fundamentalist terrorism, irrepressible around the world, worldwide. He publishes that in 1958, so it's literally, and literally dozens and dozens and dozens of other things. So I say in this higher standard of proof, and we can get into more and more of the specifics, I mean, it is pretty much, if I had any hair left, it would be curling my hair. I mean, it's just like, oh my gosh, how does he know all that at that time? He publishes this information as, I refer to as the higher standard of proof. And this is also what's gotten scientists involved, those who are courageous enough to put their egos aside and stop worrying about their funding, etc. And some of whom will do it surreptitiously and won't even admit that they're looking at this material. I'll go into more detail about all this stuff. Just this is good, as I say, this is going to go interactive, just so I'm not right. And then in 19, click, I don't have anything to show you here. So we have books and pictures and all that. Okay, so we've got step one is the physical evidence. Step two is the abundant, prophetically accurate information. We have over 200 specific examples now of corroborated information that this man verified and published before official discovery or the events occurred, right? Okay. The third thing is, well, what's the reason for this? We know they're not coming down here to hang out, land in the White House lawn, sit around and get shot at. Well, let's go kill them. That's what we specialize in on the planet Crazy. So they're not going to do that. So what's the reason for this? And the reason, as I've deduced it, is to help us assure our own future survival, our own very threatened future survival. I don't think anybody in this room has a doubt in their mind that things are not the way they should be, the way we prefer it, that which would be healthy, uplifting, etc., etc. So this third element is called spiritual teaching. Now, sometimes that word spiritual is a buzzword for people. I understand that, because the immediate connotation is religion, sects, cults. No, this is a non-religious, belief-free teaching. It means you're not told that you must believe it. One of the things that I've said to people who confront me with various, biblical texts or anything else, I say, look, every religion, which would include yours, whatever you have, I had one to be mine, rests on a premise that you cannot bring into a courtroom. You can't even bring it into a kindergarten. What's in this book is true, because this book says it's true. Right? So if there's truth in there, and actually there's truth in all religions. There's elements of truth everywhere. The problem is, according to the information in this case, the truth gets wrapped in disinformation. And reasons for that pertain also to our religions, how they form, who the various gods were, what got set in motion by whom, when it happened, etc., etc. That information is covered in fair detail in this information. You can't prove everything in there, and you're not asked to believe it. You're asked only to think if you want to do that. So one of the things that we now have is an abundance of research done by a number of people. Some of it's redundant, meaning that obviously some people went and looked into the same thing and came up with the same thing. Some other people found this and some found that. It's there for you. It's been done, but it's not over because there's so much information that hasn't even been translated. In this case, there's 26,000 pages of information, plus probably closer to 28,000, because Meier is an enormously prolific writer. He's written over 50 books. He's had hundreds of contacts where he's transcribed this information. So we have an abundance of documentation that and copyrighted evidence that certain things were written at a certain time, which a lot of you know that. So let's back up a little bit now and just introduce this thought. This isn't going to be an unrelenting, monologue. Because you're here, because you have interest in the various elements and parts that may be pertinent to this, as well as this case specifically, I'm going to open this so that we create a dialogue as much as we can, right? So I'll just say this for those who don't know. Billy Edward Albert Meier is a slightly over 78-year-old man living up in the rural part of Switzerland, the Zurich Islands. And he has one arm. He lost his arm in 1964 in a bus accident in Turkey. He was told 10 years beforehand, you're going to lose your arm, it's part of your destiny, we don't mess with that, we can't do anything. So get used to it. If you want to carry on with this mission, you're going to be doing it with one hand. And all of the really amazing evidence he's responsible for presenting after he lost his left arm. And this is why the skeptics that work so hard to try to debunk his evidence, photograph, and they haven't been able to, of course. It's almost laughable. If he had no arms, they would accuse him of doing everything with his teeth, making models and all the rest of it. But he has one hand, and he doesn't make models of UFOs. He photographs them, some of them within 15 feet of him. I think we probably have one closer. Yeah, you'll see there's photographs of a highly unusual craft. He was within 15 feet of his front yard. And there's 64 photographs and a 5-minute video in that whole particular element of his evidence that was just last year independently analyzed and authenticated. And yeah, I'm going to ask that we wait just a little because I want to get a flavor of what we're going to be interested in here, and then we can pass that stuff around because if that's okay with Carter, because he's brought the books. All right, so we'll do that. It won't be too long. So what I'm going to ask is just hands get raised, and we'll see if it's audible for everybody. I'll repeat if somebody has a question and you don't all hear it. I'll just repeat it as I try to address it. Notice I didn't say answer because I don't know the answer to this question. So before I launch into more about where humanity is going, what are some of the things that interest you? Maybe we'll hear a bunch of them so we can throw them into the mix, okay? So raise your hand if you've got a question, a segment, or comment, a little thing that we might address here today, and then say it, I'll repeat it, and then we'll see how we weave it into our thing, okay?
I just have a question. Why is he doing that?
Why this man?
Why this man as opposed to, I mean, there are other people that also say they have had contact.
Right. Sure. Why Billy Meier? You know what, we'll take it since this is the first one. Okay, here's the thing. There are a lot of people that claim that they are contactees. Sometimes I've said to people, before you tell me about your contacts with these extraterrestrials, when was the last time the President of the United States called you up to ask us, or the Vice President, or a Supreme Court judge, congressperson, or senator? Wait, how about the governor of the state or the mayor of your town, the dog catcher in your town? When was the last time that person consulted you and told you you were important and we're going to convey information to you, you're going to disseminate? You know, what are you going to, you know, so part of what happens is people make the claims, but they cannot substantiate it. And we're going to address the why of this man and the why maybe not of other people. We have to understand, and
I want to know what her question was.
Sure, I'm sorry. Her question was, why this man, when there are other people that claim also that they are being contacted by extraterrestrials, meeting with extraterrestrials, why this man?
Wasn't he connected with them in their lifetimes? Is that a microphone for the...
Okay, so any further questions, we'll pass the microphone. Let's address this one right now. As this lady said, wasn't he connected with them in other lifetimes? So this brings us to an element of the spiritual teaching about reincarnation. How many people think reincarnation is real? Raise your hand. Okay. So we can say that the majority of people here, and I'm going to use the appropriate word, we believe reincarnation is real, right? Because we can't prove it. We can say, well, it makes sense, or I think I was, Napoleon in my last life. That's why I'm just shortening this one. But we can't really establish with empirical evidence that it exists. Part of the reason is we can't get proof that the human spirit exists. I'm distinguishing that from the soul, again, according to the information of the case. What we call the soul, they refer to primarily as the psyche, located primarily around the solar plexus. Emotions, personality, different, very material aspects of who we are. The spirit is said to be a part piece, a tiny holograph, if you will, or holographic piece of the creation. This consciousness, this universe in which we all live, that is the creator and the sustainer of everything within it, we all carry a fragment of it, according to this teaching, and it's kind of in the center of the brain. The soul is said upon death to dissolve the information being absorbed into the spirit, which passes into what they call the beyond, a consciousness-less state. No awareness. We're not seeing, Aunt Edna and Uncle George and all the kids. Come on now. It's not happening that way. There's explanations for the tunnel and the afterlife. People seeing near-death stuff. That's a separate thing. So the spirit is the part that goes into the beyond until it's time to reincarnate. And we're not. Again, I just want to say one more time, so you know, I'm relaying information to the best of my understanding, according to the information in the case. I'm not telling you that I can prove this stuff. I can prove other stuff as well as I can prove anything. But this is just so you get an idea, because when you choose to read the spiritual teaching and go into it in more depth, you will get a much better, fuller picture than I can give you right now. So, the spirit doesn't choose its parents like, I'm coming in to be a golfer and I'm going to incarnate over there. There's no consciousness. It is said to be a vibratory affinity. We don't, right now, at least in English, have more information about how that vibrational affinity works. Spirit in an unconscious way comes in to the embryo on the 21st day. We're coming back to this why Billy Meier and the reincarnation thing, but this, as you can see, you pull the thread on this story and the whole sweater is going to follow you. You can reweave it afterwards. So, we've got the spirit coming in on the 21st day, the heartbeat starting now, the embryo is animated, the fetus is starting to develop, along with the new personality. So on the abortion issue, both sides are right and both sides are wrong, according to this information, because up to the 21st day, because they can detect the spirit we can't yet prove exists, and they can detect its presence with the embryo and the pregnancy at an early enough time, in cases where there's a need to protect, let's say, the life of the mother, or there's something that's going to develop along with the embryo, up to the 21st day, they feel that abortion is a perfectly, fine and neutral thing. There's, no burden to the parents or the mother bearing the child to have the abortion. After that time, they say, well, it's a murder. We're not trying to make you feel bad, but because it's now an inspirited life form. And there are times when that could be allowable in extreme situations or circumstances. So we're not trying to moralize here, anything, just giving you information. So it is said that the spirit that enlivens this man, Billy Meier, enlivened in the past on this planet alone 6 other specific prophets, each of whom also worked with the forefathers of the current day Pleiaren that we often call the Pleiades, and that those prophets they've all had the same mission, essentially, in their own time, to bring the true spiritual teaching to humanity. The 6 previous prophets suffered from being in time frames in which nobody to speak of, except a select few here and there could read and or write. And consequently, when they would bring the teaching and they'd have somebody write it down, before you know it, it got falsified, changed, religions formed, cults formed, different things formed. This is the electronic age. It's also the age in which most people on Earth, well, a super high percentage can read and write. And we can preserve the teaching as it's intended, without alteration, without setting a cult or religion in motion, having people go wacky. And this is the one true thing. Oh, here we go again. Every religion, of course, is the one true religion with the one true God, one true teaching. Everybody else is an infidel. They should obviously be slain according to certain religions. So, it's love and mercy, right? Have mercy. So, in this case, we're told that this is how and why this particular man, my version of it is 6 times. Remember, any and every time human beings are involved with anything, things can and will get screwed up. Sooner or later, they get screwed up because mistakes are also part of evolution. There are no perfect beings. They say, well, the ascended masters, perfect beings floating around. Yeah, the ascended misers, for all I care. There's just no perfection in human beings. It doesn't happen, and that's fine. We have to keep evolving. Trial and error might help us to have more compassion for each other and ourselves when we realize, oh my gosh, well, of course they screwed up. That's a way human being. So what we've got here is, my version of it is, the 7th and final prophet for Earth, according to this information. And it's not a celebrity gig. It's miserable. Obviously, we know from everybody that came before, you get crucified, stoned, burned, chased out of town on the rail, you lose your arm. Meier's had 22 attempts in his life, documented. So it's he's had the most amazing experiences probably of any human being who's ever lived, but on the other hand, some of those amazing experiences have been just brutal. Beyond, you're going to have your arm ripped off your body, have a nice day, and then get back to work. Oh boy. So the guys that kind of responsible for working with the 7th and final prophet said, okay, let's see. Well, we have these fiery types overturning tables and temples and swinging swords and horses and all that. This time, when people find him, he's going to be a late middle-aged pot-bellied, gray-bearded, one-armed Swiss farmer. How's that? That's it. Nobody's going to follow that guy. No cults, no deity. He's going to just have to walk that miserable path, put the stuff out there, do it all, and make sure that people don't glom onto him as some savior or anything else, because there's no saviors, no one's coming to save us. We got to do it. Right? So, what we have here, according to information, is this is the same spirit that enlivened the 6 other prophets in the lineage. Here it is. It's the last time. We don't need another prophet. We just need a lot of people to pay attention. We have to start, if we decide to, start studying what this is about. And the big element of this is what's called the might of the thoughts. how we consciously and unconsciously are moment by moment creating our own lives for better or worse. Everything you see in this room, or if you look outside, that isn't naturally growing like a human being or a plant, a fly buzzing around, everything we see is thought made manifest. This is all thought made manifest. Somebody, some human being, came up with the concept and designed the modification, the improvement. In some cases, made something worse than a little bit. But this is, we are in this sea of thought and thoughts. We now have about 8.5 billion people on the planet. Everybody, and certainly is now babies yet, although there's thought going on at a certain level, even babies. But we're all thinking certain things. The thoughts lead to the feelings. It doesn't have to be the other way around. Now I'm not talking about hot and cold. I'm talking about those things that we call feelings, affinities, antipathies, likes and dislikes, rushes of emotion, passion, hatred, anger, fear, guilt, all this stuff. This comes from thought. Sometimes it's not even conscious thought. We don't always notice that we've had a thought that triggered us for better or for worse to feel something, and then another micro thought that spurred us to act. Okay? So, did we cover a little bit of that on the why Billy? And there's, we can go into more, but essentially they're saying this particular spirit form is extremely ancient, and it's actually the oldest spirit form in the universe, which they say is teeming with life anyhow, and that its gig is to have the, no thank you very much, but I'll do it again, role of prophet to bring the truth to humanity, certainly on this planet, maybe on others in time past. And it does that not to gain a following or anything else, but to help humanity to learn how things work. How things work, I mean, it's a simple way of putting it. The creation that has made everything manifest has given duration to the elements. Some things last 10,000 years, some last 10 minutes, some last 10 seconds. Everything is made of the stuff of thought, of the creation, which has birthed everything in all thought. It has its immutable laws. It doesn't punish. It doesn't grant favors and prayers. It has established how things work. So if, as human beings, our job, if we choose to accept the mission, so to speak, all that easy, our job is to learn how things work, we choose to, and to do our best to, move our lives along that path that is in a sense a path of least resistance. It doesn't mean that there's no trial and trouble, tribulation, suffering, challenges that will make us stronger if we embrace them and go with mastering them. It means that cause and effect, for instance, is a mutable law of the universe. Energy follows stuff. So for every action, in physics they say there's an equal and opposite reaction. The law of cause and effect actually says for every cause, there's at least one effect. And oftentimes, a cause sets into motion multiple effects. So, and you can see it in every day that we start breaking it down. It could be like a comedy in a sense, something angry, so they throw something here, which knocks that over. This happens, a thing cries over there, baby runs, somebody breaks a limb. We are constantly creating effects with our thoughts. Most of the time, we're doing it unconsciously. We're not noticing what's moving us and making us feel certain things, and I think I'll do this, and why? So it's an immutable law. If we grasp that and became, there's a trend now for mindfulness, right? It's great. We're becoming mindful. So it's a good time then for people to have introduced to them while you're being mindful, start to learn how things work, and then you can do what's recommended here, which is a 24/7 observation of our thoughts. What part of the teaching here is that no matter what we're doing, if my mouth is going here, or I'm stuffing the spaghetti, or we're sleeping, or walking, or arguing, that we have a neutral, positive position. We can be fully engaged in something, we have our energy up and over, but there's a neutrality available in consciousness, whereby we are observing. This funny guy named Michael's doing this and thinking that. We don't have to voice it, that we're observing. So consciousness is taking this in, and by observing our thoughts, we learn to control them. So instead of just when something pops in our mind because of an, let's say, external or internal impetus, impulse, we don't have to always be pushed like, Pavlovian pooches into reacting a certain way. Out there, ring the bell, we can get him jumped through that hoop. You know that you can get, and we've all been the person that someone got, but the people to behave certain ways by saying certain things, even by looking at them a certain way, or, taking a posture. We take this in unconsciously all the time. So what happens is, while we're living our life, we don't suddenly become robotic, like, I gotta observe myself so they're not saying. No, we're just asked to be conscious. Be conscious. Not of necessarily of, fancy things, and pretty artwork necessarily tells us this is what the universe is. If that's there too, how do we react to it? But be conscious. Now, while we're being conscious, we're learning to control, because certain things, when we start to discover what we're really thinking and creating feelings about, we might decide, what? That isn't really productive. I've been doing that for about maybe 15 years, and I keep getting the same result here. So I think now, I have a little workshop. We might even be able to do a little taste of this today if you guys want. In my little workshop, we work on taking an element that's personal to each person without revealing to anybody. It's not about, I shouldn't say that I beat my dog. Okay, we're not doing that. It's like everything, self-responsibility is the key to all of it. At the core of this is a few corners of self-responsibility. Nobody outside us to turn our power over to. Maybe there's nice people who happen to be rabbis, mothers, priests, reverends, whatever, but it's not their job to be responsible for us. Maybe they have some wisdom to share, or maybe they don't. We are solely responsible. And that goes for all of our so-called leaders, political, governmental, everything else. It's like this is part of what our job is, and it's going to be that way. Once you hear this information, if you choose to, it's your task for the rest of all your incarnations. These folks supposedly flying around with it, they live by these teachings. And they also make mistakes too. Billy makes mistakes. There's no infallibility. Billy's just another human being who happens to have an unusual thing in life. Well, he has some friends who will take him and traveling through time and space and blah, 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 but he's got to be down here. He does his work in the garden and all the rest as they do. No matter how high-tech, every tech toy in the world that's now inundating our world, we still have to take care of very basic things. If the grid goes down and your battery fails, then, there you are. Where do you go? You're stuck with you.
I had a question about Denny and Barney Hill. That one. I was wondering if Mr. Meier maybe tried to approach them, and does he have any other, was there any written word that maybe he might have tried to reach out to other people who are like-minded or experienced?
Okay.
That's interesting to me.
This is an interesting thing because, and this is why this case, I'm sorry, the Betty and Barney Hill case. People familiar with the two people, I think, in Massachusetts have claimed that they had been abducted. They were put into some kind of hypnotic regression. They both told a similar story, that they were abducted by little aliens of some form. They saw a star map, and some scientists said, well, that's got to be zeta reticulum, and blah, blah, blah. No hard evidence, but the stories were very interesting and compelling. And this is one of the reasons why I like the Meier case, because it's not all sewed up, airtight, everything's perfect. For a long time, in the material, what we see is the Plejaren people accepted as fact basically whatever people said here. One of the reasons for it is, And I asked Billy, I said, I don't think these Pleiadians is what they became called. There's no Pleiadians, there's no life in the Pleiades. Pleiadians. So I don't think these people fully understood us for quite a while. And Billy said, that's true. They didn't. They didn't understand something about us, and that is that we lie to ourselves and each other. They don't lie because it's illogical. See, it's not that we are people who've done lie. We don't lie. Very nice. No, because lying never changes the truth to the better. It always compounds the negative consequences of the lie. If you're getting into, whether it's airplanes or space travel, somebody says, oh yeah, I can fly this thing over. Are you certified and tested and all that? Well, I'm not getting on that plane just because you said so. And it could be even simpler than that. We encounter it all the time with people who twist the truth, including white lies. They don't do those either. They will conceal things sometimes. They'll withhold information if it's not the time for it. But they will not lie about it because they're selfish. They're very practical. They don't want the burden of having to do, oh my gosh, yeah, I lied about it. Okay, now everybody's yelling at them and they've screwed something up. They just know it doesn't work. So Billy said, we just, they took everything that people were saying about their meetings with aliens, okay, because there are other life forms in the universe, and then they, including the Betty and Barney Hill case, and this is about that, they assumed that was true as well. Not too long ago, I think it was in the last couple of years, they went and looked at virtually every claim about extraterrestrial contact. Now that they realized, those folks don't always tell the truth. So they had, with their technology, they investigated. Their technology also involves time travel back and forward according to the information. Okay. And they found, according to them, that Betty and Barney Hill were not abducted by extraterrestrials, but had an experience that was affected by electromagnetic energies in that area, as the Bermuda Triangle is a similar, not exactly similar, but an area where certain forces intersect and cause certain things to happen, whereby the sea will swallow up ships and planes will hit this energy thing and they'll flop into the ocean as well. Now, I'm not telling you that's true, but I want to answer the second part of your question about, did Meier reach out to these people? Well, he was tutored since the age of 5 by a number of specific people in a couple of races. So his experiences were very direct, very profound. He knew his experiences to be real. And he also received a lot of information from these people that there would be other people coming forward claiming, as this is where we come back to this Pleiadian, and we want to take a question, and that is that in January 28, 1975, he has his first official contact with this woman who calls herself Semyaze. And she says, you're going to be typing, with one hand, you're going to be transcribing all this stuff, we'll send it to you telepathically, we'll write it out. And then because, I should mention, since he was 5 years of age, he was taught both material telepathy and spiritual telepathy, which is, both of these are still pretty well beyond us. But he was taught to be able to receive, identify over 5 million symbols, pictograms, well over that information. So that when they would be telepathically sent to him, he would see the image, know what it meant, translate it simultaneously into German, while he typed it out with one hand at speeds of up to 100 words per minute in German, capitalized. All over the place. All the nouns are capitalized. We've got it easy. We don't capitalize anything except proper English. Okay, so what's all this about? So she said, you're going to refer to us as Pleiadians. And he said, why? There's no life in the Pleiades. You're not Pleiadians, you're Pleiadians. She said, well, we know in advance that once you start publishing and publicizing our contacts, your photograph, everything else, people are going to come out of the woodwork claiming, I am meeting with the Pleiadians. I'm chairman of the Pleiadians. I've got a Pleiadian girlfriend. I've got 3 kids with one of the Pleiadian. It's going to just keep on going on and on. You're going to know, Billy, that it isn't so, because a lot of people are going to come, they'll make these claims, they'll contact you and tell you they're meeting with us. We're not meeting with them. This is very simple, it's very practical. Number one, we haven't started to work with other people, which, as you know, in year 5, in this life, each lifetime, no matter how evolved we could be and knowledgeable in another previous life, we start over. Everybody, including Billy Meier. He had the benefit of having a mentor who was super advanced human being in material knowledge, spiritual wisdom, and technology. Just like we are supposed to get ourselves balanced off. They're balanced, and so he had devices that were used to accelerate his thinking, to show him things from the farthest past, things pertaining to his previous personalities, show him things from the future. Also explained about what a miserable, challenging life he'd have, and that at any point in this mission, if he decides he's had enough, he can just drop it. This is free will, as we all. Okay, 1 second, because I think we can always come back to this, but let's have this question there.
Question is, good and bad aliens.
Good and bad aliens. Okay. Just like everything in creation is plus and minus, positive and negative, good and bad. We just are not troubled at this point in our life. We don't have to deal with it. Excuse me, one second. This is really good. If I burp my way through this presentation. No, it's really small. Okay. So, good and bad aliens. When you start to read the depth of this material to the basic origins of our race here on Earth, which is a mingling of the naturally arising human life on a planet when the conditions are right for it, coupled with the fact that our ancestors go back 22 million years to the Syrian star system. Syrians. The Dogon tribe in Africa often refers to the Syrian star system. Okay, be that as it may. Genetic modifications made to people there that we've inherited, 2 specific ones, were made to be evil. Shortened lifespans compared to what would be natural for us. We'll get them back, it's just going to take a few incarnations. You won't remember. It's like reincarnation. Don't worry about dying, you'll live through it. So, you've got, and makes the world a better place to come back to, as my friend Klaus Sweden said. So, you've got this reincarnation thing, we've got a little bit about that. In the Syrian star system, a race was genetically modified to become a warrior race to protect some of our ancestors in the Syrian star system who had degenerated to the positive. Because their ancestors already, millions of years ago, were space-traveling lunar warriors. They had the high tech, they had spiritual knowledge, but not everybody used it for the best. They manipulated, destroyed, they ruined planets and systems, they blew things up. Cosmic, it's like Star Wars on steroids. So one of their lineages lands in the Syrian star system and says, well, let's chill and be really spiritual from here on. Arts and opulence and beauty and creativity. They genetically engineered out not only their high aggression, their fighting spirit. So now they're just love and peace puppies, but that means they attract any hostile types, opposites. Ooh, there they are, let's go get them. So they have to quickly get about genetically modifying, engineering a race who'd be willing warriors for them. Yeah, we like it. So they increase their propensity for violence, for really going out there, kicking cosmic keys through, all this stuff. And they shorten their lifespans down to about 100 years, implanting genetic propensities for degenerative diseases. So, just to, and to do it, the reason, of course, was they wanted to make sure that these guys, that they were getting, into this warlike mentality to protect them, didn't live long enough to turn around and go, ooh, we're done with them. Let's take on these guys that created us and we'll have the whole thing to ourselves. So when they served their purpose, I'm getting off a little bit on this, so I think what I'll do is just go back to this good and bad alien. So when we talk about that, for the most part, we're exposed to all this information about reptilians and grays and all this other stuff that doesn't exist on this planet. It does not exist on this planet. The grays, for instance, are based on the android beings that were found at the crashes, plural, such as Roswell. Some were alive, just a few, and the rest were dead. These were androids created by an extraterrestrial race that sent out their scout ships around, and that one crashed, was brought down, whatever. And those beings were not, they were not the creators. They were not even capable of procreating with each other. But they made a great model upon which to start this evil, gray, agenda, which goes back not just to the 30s and 40s, but actually about 1915 when the cover-up started about craft seen over the battlefields of Europe, the antagonists each thinking secret weapon from the other side. How come they're not attacking us? And finally, the leaders figured out, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't come from here. We're going to keep quiet about it, and a conspiracy of silence even among enemies at higher levels. That worked its way all up, to the Roosevelt administration. I'm sure there's some people here that remember H.G. Wells wrote The War of the Worlds, and Orson Welles, who was a really amazing creative person, actor, producer, director, speaker. He and H.G. Wells were both enlisted, because were under threat of death to themselves and their entire families, to do the War of the Worlds radio broadcast, in which I think it was little green men landed in New Jersey. People killed themselves with the radio broadcast. The intelligence agencies then knew that if they want to control people and keep us from becoming cosmically aware, since they knew there are other beings out there, we haven't been attacked by anybody, but we can't lose our power to these other forces. You understand? It's like the reason there's a cover-up, and right now the UFO cover-up really is only about the Billy Meier case. Because there's nothing else anybody can prove. You can't force the government to reveal the cover-up of what? For the most part, the government doesn't know anything officially. Most of these guys are so busy trying to make as much money as they can with data. UFOs, they don't know. Alien phenomena. But at the higher level, secret military, they know, and they certainly know the Meier case is the only one where there's evidence. And the guy is still meeting with these people. The CIA has photographed this craft in Switzerland themselves. There have been 236 radar sightings by the Swiss military since 95, in a 10-year period. Radar, 236 radar sightings. They know what's going on. So this is what the cover-ups are. The evil alien thing, there's no grays. That's, yes, there are surgically altered people who've been made to look like aliens. That certain secret military groups have done this. The reptilian thing, if there's anybody's ever seen any creatures of reptilian, again, these are modifications, these are man-made altered forms. They're not coming from outer space. Logic tells us that if an advanced negative race finds this planet 1915, 1920, 30, 40, 50, even today, if it can get here from dozens to hundreds of light years from here, they're long-lived, they have super technology, they could take over this planet in minutes, or destroy it, or destroy everybody on it and take it over and, create their own Century 22 wheels, whatever they want to do. They wouldn't need to make agreements. This is playing to our context of how things work. We're going to make an agreement with the Russians. So that means extraterrestrials will have to make an agreement with the U.S. government if they want to abduct anybody, because otherwise we'll, what are you talking about making an agreement with extraterrestrials? If they can abduct, if there's something from outer space that can abduct you, and indeed in the past there have been what they refer to as contact examinations. Some space traveling race, very scientific, said, well, let's examine this person. Okay, take them, put them under, wipe the memory of this, take samples or whatever, put them back. They're saying, yeah, about a handful of those over the past 100 years or whatever. All this alien, and they need permission, and we've got people going to their world and exchange programs. This is to keep you going, instead of taking that case, 100% self-responsibility for your life. So when we hear about things going on, how did that happen? Or, oh my gosh, and all the rest of it, we don't go, deer in the headlights, because we've been paying attention to science fiction and worse, stuff to just scare us, mislead us, distract us, entertain us endlessly. And now we don't know what to do about it in our own lives. Our thoughts now become fearful, frustrated, hopeless. We'll run to this, and we'll run to that. We'll try to get somebody to make us feel better. We'll listen to a sermon, whatever. We're looking for a fix. Come back to the golden case. Where are you going, humanity? You can't get there from here if you don't get it straight.
What is the difference between mental, material telepathy versus spiritual telepathy?
Okay, I can give you a bare definition. Yes. What is the difference? Really, what is in there? Come on. What is it? Look at those things.
Welcome to Lake County.
What is the difference between material telepathy and spiritual telepathy? Here's the best way I can put it, because my knowledge of this is just information all this stuff. What we call spiritual, for the most part, we're spiritual people and all this stuff, we go to stuff. Now, Meier says, no, it's what you're talking about is consciousness related. It's still the material consciousness connected to all the things we do and the practices we have. They're consciousness related. Now, it's not a bad thing. We got a film that I did with my buddy, and I think it came out in 2008, called The Silent Revolution of Truth. Just about the first thing that Meier says in it is, the meaning of life is the evolution of consciousness. That's a pretty book. I'll tell you something, when you read his stuff, he does not even mince or throw away words for effect. Everything this man writes is extremely specific, and we're still not even getting the purest form of it, because it comes out in German, which is a much more precise and advanced language than English. They just said, we're sorry, you're going to get, but it's not going to be the full meaning of a lot of things, especially what they do call the spiritual teaching, which also still is related to consciousness. So, spiritual has to do with the spirit. And none of us on this planet, and none of us for a long time to come, are in a place where we have a conscious spirit, a spirit that can partake of a higher level of telepathy, which can extend farther in time and space than the material telepathy. So I told you I'm not going to help it. Because if and that doesn't mean that we don't experience things that we could call telepathic, where we know something and we're working on that and developing it. As time goes on in the next few hundred years, human beings will be able to develop more purposefully and more successfully the material consciousness, material telepathy. We don't need to run before we can walk, because we've been at a disadvantage for millennia by virtue of the various belief systems, the various religions, which only had at best so much knowledge, so much to give us. Meier said part of what we refer to the spiritual teaching as part of the secret sciences, that which was, actually still is known, certain levels by certain people, and kept secret from the masses. There's a book here called The Might of the Thoughts. It's amazing. It's Meier's book on thinking and the might of the thoughts. Every thought, he says, has might. So if you know that and you're observing and controlling your thoughts, doesn't mean you have to huff and puff. It means that when you know that every thought has might, you can organize, control, issue your thoughts, stay conscious, reaffirm them, strengthen them, and all this stuff, and that they bring inevitably, in their own timing, they bring their result. Cause and effect works unfailingly. Sometimes we get a big hit on that and we know, oh my gosh, I was thinking about it. I was not well for a long period of time, someone might say, and I was infirm, I was debilitated, and I really wanted to get better. And I put my mind to it. And I attracted this, I attracted that. Good. And, well, this may not help everybody. Well, that one might not either, but this might. But what was the core element of this? It was that you started to think and craft those thought forms and you stayed on it. You didn't give up. You didn't let doubt throw you off. You might have encountered it sometime, but doubt is pretty useless. It just really drains us off. Doubt, anxiety, both of those things take us off of this manifestation. Now, if we're not used to this idea fully, we may doubt that it could be true. We might get anxious about something. We think, oh my gosh, maybe I wasted my life. Where we are now is where we start with our new purpose in life. And some things can move very quickly, even if we didn't know this before, because we've been unconsciously, subconsciously working on these things, but we haven't organized, become conscious and focused, directed. We didn't understand how this would work. But once we really lock in there, some things may go shooting through, and then you're waiting for everything to come in fast, but other things may not. But now we have sovereignty over ourselves, over our minds, and thoughts, and our feelings. We create our own feelings. If we know that, we can enjoy that. But sometimes we might not enjoy the feelings we're creating too, but we might enjoy that we just noticed how unenjoyable those feelings were. We just start crafting about something, somebody, or whatever, So, there's an old saying, it isn't circumstances or events, but our attitudes towards them. Here I am standing up here. So if I happen to have knocked over my glass bottle and breaks, I could have 20 different reactions to it. Indifference, shock, frustration, anger. But everybody has their own point of view of things, right? So when we know that, we can realize that we encounter all the time people who don't know that. And that people behave in certain ways. And sometimes those ways that people behave have formerly successfully hit the bullseye in our buttons. We've taken and formed our personalities to have beliefs, to have preferences, and the likes and the dislikes. Even that, likes and dislikes, we all have them, but we have to know that we have them, because liking or disliking something is not the most important thing. What's the truth in this situation? What am I learning here? What is this moving me towards? Is there something that this dislike is going to block me from doing something necessary? Or this like and this affinity is going to mislead me because I'm just too much a sucker for that particular like I have. A food, a person, a color, and it doesn't matter. So these are any and everything that comes to mind. And we want to let things come to mind, because they're coming to mind anyhow. Then we can learn how to control it and direct it. That means that everybody that's here now, there you are. You're your own sovereign source of creating your life. Yes, there's certain givens. Sure, astrology, well, it doesn't determine your life. There are influences, but he's written about everything. He says, well, the radiations from the central galactic sun come through and are filtered through the planets in the solar system, producing certain influences. They're not determinators. Some influences are more profound, or stronger, weaker than others. And some influences, if we know these things, sometimes we can actually use that to our advantage, but not to say, well, I'm sorry, the moon is over there in Sag. Really strange, scattered time. Okay, well, what are you going to do with that? A lot of people turn things over completely to all sorts of systems. I love the I Ching. I ended up memorizing it. I threw the book away and oh no, I got it all in my head now. I still like to do this. Whatever we want to turn to as a reflector because we have an insecure moment and we think, we're still always the sole authority. Here's an example. There's what, 100? Let's say there's 100 religions in the planet. Probably more, actually, if you think about it. Or this. Each religion, if this table extended and we had a holy book from all the religions and we said to 1,000 people, please line up beside the one true religion for you. People file in, fill up, there's 3 here, there's 120 there, 14. And what that means is that each person has actually become the authority themselves. They said, oh, I read that, I read that. This is the true one. Of course, not everybody agrees with them. So everybody ultimately is more of an authority than any of the deities in any of the books. Because you got to choose and say, that's the truth. Oh, really? How did you know that? Well, I know. So, who's God? If you know which is the one true one, and this is just one of the little tricks in life that we play on ourselves about turning power over outside of ourselves. And it's been ingrained for millennia, so we can, some people will hear me say that, they'll feel very uncomfortable because it seems like a blasphemy. Other people can feel less, and all sorts of varieties. But if we notice what we think, if we notice how something that somebody says makes us feel, we now have a whole inner, like a university of study. It's us. It's us. And Meier says, we have an inner self and an innermost self. We have an inner teacher, meaning there is within each person a certain element of wisdom, a certain conscious, but often unconsciously present inner knowing. So we learn to become more still so that we can detect. A lot of people, once we learn the secret, you can have anything you want. You don't even have to work for it. Oh, great. So everybody's busy programming so much that cosmic UPS guy never can find you to deliver your thing. But it doesn't matter because you just don't get any and everything without your own effort and all that anyway. But when we realize that we can, with our thoughts, manifest, we start to feel more comfortable inside ourselves. And if we know people who are on their own version of this path in life, we're comfortable with them because we recognize in them, wow, this is a universe in front of me. I became so much more grateful for the people I live with. I'm kind of a little bit of a hermetic life because I'm very busy working on my own stuff. So if I go out, I don't know a lot of people where I live, but I go into restaurants and my social life can often be interacting with a waiter or a waitress or somebody, or going down the street where I live. People are very courteous too. It's probably that way. You can say hello to each other, or open doors. Ooh, I'm living in it's great. But now, no matter who it is, it's nobody that's disregarded. Oh, it's just so-and-so. Because it's kind of like, wow, goes that universe down the street. And if we're all kind of deciding that we're going to pay more attention to this stuff, then we also have a peer teaching kind of relationship with each other. So our humanity, where are we going? We're going in an evolutive, upward spiral. We're not just shooting straight up and taking every step in there, but we're spiraling upward, gathering together everything and everybody in their own way. We're not taking on unnecessary responsibilities for others, but we're helping. We're assisting wherever we can do that. Okay, so if we covered some of that.
You didn't quite explain, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm a practical person.
Please.
And a weirdly question the difference between material telepathy and spiritual telepathy.
Okay, let me try this way. Everything we see and what we're doing is all material consciousness based. The material world.
Consciousness and thoughts. Including the consciousness of thoughts.
including the consciousness of thoughts. Of course, that's going through our consciousness. What we see is spirit made manifest. The creation, which is the ultimate source of all existence, which is pure, still evolving spirit, which has made things manifest in the material realm, we're not in a place where our consciousness is, this will be the best word I can use, vibrationally. We're not in spiritual consciousness, where we can activate the powers of the spirit. It's right now sufficient for us for a long time to activate the powers of the material consciousness, which include things like telepathy, if you will, teleportation, all of those things, the powers, those are still in the material realm. Since we're not conscious of what is spiritual, it's best if I simply say, if you read the spiritual teaching, you may intuit more about it, but we are not in a place in our material world, our material consciousness, where we are doing spirit-to-spirit telepathy, or using the power of the spirit. We don't have that level of evolutionary development. Now, I'm not putting anybody down. If people think they do, then they can demonstrate that. We're going to write a new chapter here. But for the most part, our communication is still written, oral, verbal communication. We have intuition. We have certain telepathic kinds of abilities in, the kind of an infancy that may be between intuitive and telepathic types. We can sometimes know who's calling us. We can feel certain things, right? So that's still in the material realm. Beyond that, I'm not qualified to say.
Billy Meier was given information before things happened. That's one category. He was also given information about other planets that science did not know at the time. They asked him to write it in a book and publish it so that they would have proof that he had received this information, so people could look back and compare what they find on other planets with what happened in the past. These books were written in German. I don't know that any of them exist, maybe a few in the United States. But if I can't see these books and interpret them, I cannot prove it to myself. So is there a place on the internet or something? How do you overcome that particular?
The gentleman said Billy Meier was given information about things before they happened, about conditions on other planets, etc., before they were discovered. And this information is in German, but how can we have that information? Actually, there's a lot of it in English. It's on my website. It's on websites that link from mine. It's in books. For instance, here's the thing that happened. I think I may have told this in one of the radio shows. I'm sure. 2 years ago, this month, I was in Las Vegas, another mildly warm place, and it was a MUFON event, right? And I had a table with my DVDs, and I wasn't speaking at this event. I had been fighting with MUFON for a long time to get them to acknowledge the Meier case, because interestingly enough, in about 1953 or 56, Billy Meier was told by an extraterrestrial woman named Asket, who was his teacher at the time, that one of your biggest opponents will be a group that will come into existence in about 11 years, 13 years, whatever, will be called MUFON. And indeed, they are a big enemy of his for the most part. I've spoken at some of their things. We've got a little progress going. Always talk more about it. However, I'm at my table, got all this stuff out here, and a guy walks over. He's probably late 60s, so he's standing there, he's going. I said, "Can I help you, sir?" He said, "Yeah, I'm interested in this here UFO thing, but it's my case. Yeah, probably a hoax." He was, as firm as could be, crusty, crunchy guy. I said, "So, sir, what do you do?" He was standing there, I'll never forget this thing. He said, "I'm a retired judge." I said, "Okay, Your Honor." Could I step into your courtroom, please? So the guy was cool. I said, yes. How can I help you? So I said, sir, if I come in your courtroom here and I say that NASA's claim that they are the first to discover that the planet Mercury's surface is contracting because of the metal core. If I say to you that that claim is nonsense because my friend in Switzerland, he discovered that years ago. I said, would I have to prove that to you? Of course you have to prove it. I said, I happen to have this book on the table. I said, so if I take this book, it's not this book, you know, a little illustration here. Your Honor, if I take this book, do you see the copyright date on this book, sir? Yeah, I see it. So if I go in here, and this page over here, we have this man, Mr. Meier, asking this alleged extraterrestrial woman, Senyante, you know, something I always want to know, why is the surface of the planet Mercury contract? And on the next page, she says, oh, that's easy. It's because of the metal core of the planet. So kind of crazy. I said, Your Honor, in your courtroom, who wins? So, you do. Why? I wasn't a genius. Didn't have to be. He understood that copyrights are the internationally respected legal standard of proof of prior publication or first publication. Copyrights don't guarantee that the content is true. We've got a lot of things that are copyrighted, but they do guarantee that that date in there, at least that's the earliest date unless somebody shows an earlier one. Because in a court of law, whether it's a song or a book or anything else, somebody says, well, I wrote that. No, well, can you prove it? Yo, where's use of copyright? NASA, 2008, I think, Mercury, Billy Meier, 1976. There's lots of it. Here's a for instance. In 1986, coincidentally, 86, it is 76. In 1986, I met this guy in Sedona, Arizona. Anybody been to Sedona? Oh, wow. Look who hasn't been. Okay. We're doing a tour later today, Pink Jeeps, So, I'm in a restaurant. It was called the Sunflower Cafe on Highway 89A in Sedona. It was a health food restaurant, 1986, so that means that when my daughter and I, this lady was with there, we all went in and ordered avocado sandwiches, right? That sounds about right for the new age. And that meant that that was going to take a few hours for them to bread. You know, whatever they do back there to make it and determine the weight to get a healthy sandwich. So there's one other guy in place. We say, hey, let's come over, join us. And we started to talk Sedona, phenomenon, UFOs, and Billy Meier. And he said, well, have you read all the contact reports? I said, what's that? He said, well, that's the conversations that Meier's had. You know, in that book, you got the big picture, where the quote is there, or the top or something, you know? Well, he's got 1,800 pages of this stuff. Wow. He said, well, when you come back to LA, come up to Denver Canyon. I'll give it to you. So I went back to LA, went to Denver Canyon, 1,800 pages, mimeographed it. You remember that word, mimeograph? You know, blue and all that. So I got the stuff, took it home, and I'm reading it. It takes a long time because whoever translated that had more familiarity with German than with English, so the verbs are saying in sentences and funny structure, but man, you read that stuff and wow, this is just fascinating. I think 3 months or so it took me to just get through those. Stuck it under the bed. 1988, there I am sitting in my own business reading a local newspaper from Marina Del Rey or something. Open it up, and I see this article. A-bomb testing tied to ozone damage, percentages and stuff. New discovery by Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories in California. So no. new discovery. How can I possibly know this already? This isn't just like I know this. Oh, wait a minute. Reach under the bed. First 100 pages. Semyaze, 1975, is telling Billy Meier about the connection between the A-bomb testing and ozone damage. The fact that when A-bombs blow off or any other radioactive sources, strongly electrical emanations in the high UV range that we cannot even recognize are released in a ribbon holes in the ozone. And she goes on about this is going to lead to more ultraviolet coming through, killing off microorganisms in the atmosphere, the ground, and the seas, genetic mutations, disruption of the food chain. Wow, this is about something more than UFOs. And then the next thing that pops up, it's a year or two later, what was it? Oil earthquakes interact, something like that. It was by a guy at Stanford, Paul Siegel, 1990, I think. A scientist there who did the study and said the extraction of petroleum is helping to precipitate earthquakes. Brilliant. They told that to Meier in '76.
Isn't a lot of this stuff just common sense stuff?
Well,
You have to think about it.
there's a lot of things that are common sense that people in positions of influence and power certainly don't pay attention to, but beyond the common sense point, Meier was given, it's not just like somebody said to him, well, you know, if you do this, it's going to shake or whatever. They also told him specific times and dates and events and things pertaining to, for instance, extracting oil and natural gas precipitates an imbalance in the tectonic structure. You take the oil out, you're taking out the synovial fluid of the planet. It empties spaces or fill it up with water to different viscosity. It doesn't work. If we mine ores, we do the same thing. If we build large dams, we put unimaginable stress on the planet. Sooner or later, here or there, or maybe avoid. Same thing with large cities. Continue to build these cities. At a certain point, with everything else we're doing, cause and effect. Right? So, there's so much of it in there that is translated into English to answer you. It's freely available. On the website, you can find it, and I also answer all emails, so if somebody says, I can't find this, or where can I find that. This is a film DVD that we did a couple of years back, maybe 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago. And I have, it makes it, man, it's nice, whatever you need. So, let me just finish this off. In that film, there's over 50 specific corroborations on specific scientific facts Meier verified and published for official discovery.
Okay, well, I might read those, and I might have faith that...
No, you don't need to.
No, let me ask you though, let me be very specific here. If I cannot see the book and see the copyright date and know that the information is connected in that book, even what's on your website, it might be true, it might be taken from one of these books, you might have done the translation yourself, but that's secondhand for me.
Right.
It's not firsthand. I'm not seeing the book with the copyright.
Man is saying he wants to see the book with the copyright, right? Of course.
He doesn't understand German.
Well, also, that's good too.
I have enough German that I could figure it out.
So also do know that I have a couple pages up where we show the photo, the scanned copy of the book with the copyright. And
that helps.
Yeah, that would help. And you can, like you just said, if you can understand it in German, you can order stuff from Switzerland.
Okay, that's the missing link.
It's that way. And you see,
You mentioned I have the books I can show to people. I just didn't bring them with me because they're collector's items.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And so those books, there's 4 volumes in English from when those Stevens. Now those are not the best translations, but here's an example. Meier wrote this letter, and I'll tell you how you can also prove things. It makes us think that there's this letter I told you about the 2 Gulf Wars, AIDS, and all this stuff. In that same thing, Meier foretells from 1958 that there will be 2 planets found beyond Pluto. Now people are going to say to me, well, can you prove that letter? Do you have a copy of that letter? I say, no, but hold on, because I'm going to show you something else. In 1978, he said the same thing in a German book, which is copyrighted, we have a copy. And then in another book, from about 78 or 80, Wendell Stevens, one of the lead investigators, casually mentions, Meier was told that after the turn of the millennium, 2 planets will be found beyond Pluto. Those books have that. So we can start to, you can say, oh, it's in this book, and now here's the copyright. That's what I did with the judge. It was in one of those books, actually, that we did that. Now, here's the cool thing about the letters. People say, well, you say that letter, 1958, and it'll get good in a moment when I tell you that in 1987, in the same document in which he foretells the destruction of the WTC, i.e. the World Trade Center by terrorism, he foretells some other stuff. Do you have that letter? No. Well, how can you prove it? I'll show you how you can prove it. Especially with the 51 and 58 letters. In the 1958 letter, there's 162 specific things that he tells, right? Now, your job, if you choose to accept it, is the following. In 1958, only certain, none of the stuff happened. So how do we know he's not cheating? Well, what you can do, if you're a good researcher, you'll find out when the first German publication verifiably published of this letter was available in the book. Maybe that's 2002 or so. And okay, when was it verifiably online? Let's say it's 2006. Now, as you go through this letter, which is the same thing I would say about the 87 press, you notice a number of things. You say, well, okay, he could have done. Wait a minute. When did this thing happen? This happened after the latest verifiable date that this was available. So follow me here. For instance, in the 1987 letter, where he's telling about the destruction of the World Trade Center, we've had that letter up, let's say, the Pennock prophecies, since I think it's 2006. In there, he speaks about Russia's future military moves, which are going to involve attacking Scandinavia, and then coming through Alaska, attacking Canada and the U.S. But the Russians, he writes this supposedly in 87, it's online no later than 2006. The Russians will move their troops to Arkhangelsk, up in Siberia, northern Russia. He specifies this city. He also happens to foretell the Ebola epidemic, not an outbreak of Ebola, an epidemic. And in that same document, he foretells that France will fall to radical Islam before external powers come and take over control of the French armaments, all of their military planes and weapons. So, yeah, it's happening. He actually, in 81, he happened to first foretell the fall of France to Islam. Okay, one second, I'll finish this and we're next. So, the Russians, I think it was in the last 4 years, moved their troops to Arkhangelsk. Now, in here, he talks about ultimately an attack against Scandinavia, Finland, Norway, Sweden. If you've been following the news in the last 2 years, each of those countries has been doing military maneuvers and having minor confrontations with the presence of Russian submarines, Russian forces. Recently, Russia warned Denmark now to join NATO. Now, but this thing about, let's just say, why is he saying in 81 and 87 that Canada will be drawn into the conflict due to a certain circumstance? Canada and Russia fighting? In the last 4 years, and we got Meier in the video before it happened talking about it, Canada, the U.S., UK, China, and Russia are now all vying for control of the mineral rights at the Arctic, right? People know this. It's going to, and as Meier said, it will also then move to the Antarctic, southern pole. Now, that wasn't happening in 2006, let alone in 1987. But there's more. Canada, within the last 2 years, made an agreement, a treaty of some form, with the
eastern European state of Georgia against the wishes of Russia. I have a friend I haven't seen in over 50 years. He was a med student, I was an art student back in Chicago. And a couple of years back, suddenly his name popped in my head. I gotta find Sandy myself. So I go online and there's a trail around the country of this Dr. Weinstein, and then there's a 310 phone number. Call him up. I get it, it's his voice, I leave a message. 20 minutes later, this guy calls me back. Michael, where are you? Here in LA, he says, we're in Beverly Hills, get over here. So, okay, and it was great. I mean, here's a guy, I know him as a med student, now he's a retired oncologist and pediatrician, and he's actually, he stays on as a medical investigator. He helped to close a hospital in LA, Martin Luther King, where there were terrible conditions, people were dying down there, he went in there and he busted it. Okay, so he's a really great guy, highly religious, scientific physicist, and, medical doctor. And what are you doing, Michael? Well, the Billy Meier UFO, okay, how about what else is new in your life? Don't give me that. Okay, so we have this great conversation and stuff, and I happen to say to him, at some point in one of my visits, I say, well, look, Sandy, never mind the thing I'm working on, what, as a scientist, what do you think is the likelihood of extraterrestrial life? And he said, he turned on his, brain and said, well, it's very likely because, the elements in the universe are ubiquitous, and you've got DNA and the RNA, and we have that on that tape, on that DVD. Okay, fast forward about a year, and I send him that information about Russia and military stuff, and he says, Michael, get over here and bring your camera. I said, okay. So the newest interview clip that I had was, Billy Meier is not a paranoid schizophrenic. I have to tell you right now that this man, our government should be, this is the guy, thought I was, he said, this is highly important information. He said, how would this man be figuring out back in the 80s that the Russians are going to move troops to Arkhangelsk, which I happen to know about because I was in the military and we used to fly over that area and it's always under year-round cloud cover. It would make a perfect staging area. He said, no, this man's the real deal. Now, Billy Meier's viewpoint on Orthodox Judaism doesn't make Orthodox Jews feel good. Sandy was simply very self-honest. He's a scientist. Okay, I have my beliefs here, but this is science, and this is factual, and here you can prove that. You better pay attention to this man. He's talking truth. So, these kind of things, coming back to this, you go into the 58 letter, you go into the Hanok prophecies, or any of the other ones, you find out that outside data, because we're dealing with outside data, if Billy really did get this 87 or 58, certainly it went into German publications before it went into English, and then onto the internet. I got the Hanok prophecies probably in my hands 2-3 years before I got it translated and put online in 2006. But there was one, somebody just, move on 15%.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I was hoping, I know it's early in the presentation, I'd like to know how the information that and it's not that he figured it out, if he was told this, right? The question is, in terms of what relates to, I'm only going to, suspend any disbelief and say, okay, this guy had these conversations, and now, are you going to tell us some stuff that's going to be relevant to us right now, in terms of our future, how we can have a conversation? The other thing is that the information that he's getting from the extraterrestrial, it's not that they're foretelling as much as in terms of the space-time continuum, it seems like it's already happened. They're just telling, we're in a different place in time. So that's...
Okay, a couple things. Meier is, in his own right, a prophet. He knows how to do this himself because his previous personalities also knew how to do it. They only got better over time. They, of course, are far more scientific. He's not a high-tech man in his life. He writes the spiritual teaching for their race as well. He's just simply, his spirit is far more ancient ones, down the gate, okay. You mentioned, they have time travel capability too, supposedly. Friends, come on now, we got this nice little craft over here, partner, it's 500 what you guarantee, time and space travel. We can get a use out of it, but we can't. So what they do is they have people in their own civilization who have highly developed clairvoyant abilities, if you will, what we call psychic abilities. They can calculate, because it's something they're calculated mathematically, crunching cause and effect. I mean, we do it all, we have prophets that crunch cause and effect all the time. We call them architects, sportscasters, financial analysts. They take given information, they draw conclusions. Okay, so, and they have time travel. I'm going to give you two answers here. The first thing is we come back to that whole thing I was talking about with the might of the thoughts, self-responsibility. It means right now if we pick up that idea, and we can read a lot of free stuff. There's tons of free stuff on spiritual teaching online. The best book out of the box on it is The Might of the Thoughts. If you want to read and study and test and try, just as if you were, taking market analysis or electronics or something, biology in a university, you're going to read, study, test it out, and you become your own professor, of course. There is a specific warning that pertains overall to this area overall, and that is this. Huh? No, Northern California. In 1978, Meier had the investigators, the lead investigator was Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens, who was in the Air Force, had retired from the Air Force, and in 1947, Wendell Stevens was tasked by the Air Force to study UFOs as part of the military study of UFOs. They didn't know that most of them were secret military, but that's another thing, because the secret military, the CIA, things like that, a lot of the regular branches of government and military don't know what the other guys have, because that's, Billy Meier said, if your armed forces knew the weaponry that the CIA actually has, they would be enemies. So this is a whole other type of thing. Okay, in 1978, Billy Meier is in the kitchen now with Wendell Stevens, Lee and Britt Elders, who are two high-level private investigators, skeptics. They work for Fortune 500 companies, banks, etc., counter-espionage, securing safe rooms, computers, telephone lines. That's their work, and they know Wendell. They're friends with him. Lee Elders was a kind of also an adventurer and searching for gems and stuff from Ecuador and all that crusty guy. I was living around the corner from him 2 years ago down in Arizona. And I've known him for about 20 years, and he went too. So, we're sitting around the table with several Swiss people who are working with Billy. And the people that are there, his family and others, are volunteers, basically are there to help Meier get his information out. Some of them are witnesses to the craft and to the extraterrestrial, some of them aren't. Some of them don't know as much about the background information in these contact notes as others because they're studying the spiritual teaching more. They're busy working. Okay. So Billy, still speaks kind of a little broken English at the time when he's talking about the San Francisco earthquake. And Wendell says, "You mean the 1906 earthquake?" He says, "No, common earthquake." And he said, "What are you talking about?" So Billy leaves the room, comes back with a little yellow Kodak envelope. We all know postcards, I'm sure. Usually contain photographs. So he opened it up and he put 11 photographs on the table. And he says, "Here." They sit and they look and you pick them up and you pass them around. Wendell Stevens is a military investigator. Lee and Britt Elders are two skeptical private investigators. They're not there to do cheerleading for the strange Swiss guy, right? So what Wendell writes about this and talks about it, he says, we were looking at 11 photographs. They weren't paintings. They weren't photographs of paintings. They were photographs of the city of San Francisco. And the city was in a state of destruction, progressive different stages. The pyramidal top of the Transamerica is cracked, it's in the ground, and buildings have fallen into each other. There's lots of smoke and fire. And Billy says, "I'm sorry." When we ask him,
He said, I'm not allowed to tell you. I just will tell you that I asked, I think it was Quetzal, to take me forward to when this happens because I know this will happen and I want a photograph. And Quetzal said, okay, let's go. So he went forward in time and took these photos. Now, they're trying to figure out when will this happen? He's not going to help us out here, and we're looking at evidence that we cannot dismiss this as being photographs of the city. I know San Francisco, there it is. Some buildings I don't recognize. Maybe we don't know. So they focus in on the cars that they can see. Wendell says, the cars didn't look like the cars of today, 78 with big boxy shapes and fins. They were more like the Beatles. They were rounder cars with bigger glass windshields. Some of the glass went into the roof line, and a lot of the cars didn't have outside view mirrors. Now we know today, cameras are already in cars and vans for backing up. What's the next logical step? That's already been taken by Mercedes, Toyota, Tesla. They all have put out concept cars without those side view mirrors. So, when I was at a presentation I did up in, wherever it was, in Northern California, some UFO con thing or whatever, I talked about this and I've mentioned it on some radio shows. This, according to what these three people reported and others saw, is going to happen. And it appears that it will happen around the time when more cars do not have outside view mirrors. We already have the more rounded shape, a lot of glass going to the roof line. We got smart cars and this car and that car. That stuff is already showing up. Now, this, I would say, I don't live in Northern California, but I still would have trouble going, well, how can that be? And are you sure? And folks, this was the newest film. It's titled, And Did They Listen? People were warned. And did they listen? We, as human beings, we really don't, for the most part, allow, realize, think, accept that certain things can really happen. It's just like, going back to Washington, D.C. We cannot prevent, if that's a real event, and look, obviously Billy Meier is the first person to say that San Francisco could have an earthquake. If it's true, he's the first person to photograph it in the future. That it happens. What people would do if they're at all concerned about that. And I don't know, I mean, how far are we from San Francisco here? 100 miles?
2 hours.
2 hours, okay. So, there's another event that's coming that you're kind of in the middle of, so I'll get to that in a second. With both of these things, it's all personal responsibility. I lived in LA for probably about 40 years or something. I moved off into the mountains of Brazil for about 5 months, came back to LA in certain circumstances, brought me to move to Arizona, and I'll tell you another piece of that. Let's go to the other event, and tying it into self-responsibility. This isn't about scaring people. I didn't walk in here and say, you need to know that shape can be, This is part of this, and everybody will have their own requirement as to what the base of credible information is to lead us to do certain things if we want to. There's other things, and then we want to pay attention to as well. In 2005, Meier published a warning from the Pleiadian people that there will be a 9.0 megaquake that will run for 5 straight minutes at 9.0, followed by a tsunami in the Cascadian subduction zone of Portland. Then another quake and another tsunami. It will be devastating. Nothing, you mean 9.0 for 5 minutes? We're not built to handle it. Psychologically, this is never going to stop. No, we got 4 more minutes to go. I don't know. So, in 2007, OSU, Oregon State University, scientists published a warning that they've now deduced that there will be a
9.0 earthquake running for 5 minutes followed by tsunami. That will move, the effect of that will go down the whole coastline, even down to Southern California. We are in an area overall here, California, tectonic activity. Come on, San Andreas Fault. It's not my fault, but it's a real fault, and it's shaking and big. So we either tune this stuff out or say, let's see, or we go, okay, I think I'm going to make another plan. In about 1980, some American people asked Billy to ask the Pleiaren, where's the best place to build a center for the information and the people to gather in North America, the whole thing. And he said, okay, I'll ask them. And then he came back later and said, well, they looked into it. And they said that the best place specifically is called Munns Park, Arizona, or overall a 200-kilometer radius of Flagstaff. Right? So in 2009, I had read this some years ago, a buddy and I, we decided, let's go take a trip up to this Munns Park in Flagstaff and check it out. And drove up, had a nice, beautiful area, went back. And then I had certain circumstances occur in my life in 2011 after moving back from Brazil, where I had somebody in my life who didn't want to live in Los Angeles. And I said, well, where do you want to live? And she said, let's move to Munns Park, because we'd taken a little trip up there too. I said, okay. So, changed my life again, and moved up to Munns Park. And ultimately, I moved into Flagstaff. I'm trying to figure out why this place, and then I could see it. And Billy had said something subsequently about why. I think in 2006 or 2008 they mentioned it again. Geologically stable. Yeah, every couple of years you get a 3.0 earthquake, stuff moves everywhere, but it's just marvelously stable. It's at 7,000 feet, the air is free, pine forests that extend forever. Earth isn't real good for growing stuff, you're going to have to figure that out. But otherwise, gee, a really interesting area to think about getting away from a lot of the coming time stuff. Now, let's be really straight. You can be safe or not safe anywhere. That's also the might of the thoughts. So if you're working in the might of the thoughts, you have to decide whether you want to move from Lake County or San Francisco or anything else. But you keep developing your consciousness. You'll know when and where to be for yourself, right? And hopefully, well, or purposefully. So if you're starting now, you're working on your overall, let's say, okay, I think I'm going to want to work more on this consciousness part of this whole deal. And one of my priorities is going to be to, bring into my own conscious awareness the best location for myself. That's now putting that in motion, and then it's up to you.
Yes, on this developing the consciousness, I'd like to know what your opinion is about the role of prayer, meditation, and yoga to aid each of us in joining with our own spirit and actually connecting with the larger consciousness and God.
Okay, so this
What I define as God, you might define as nirvana.
Okay, this lady wants to know what the role of things like yoga, meditation, and prayer. And this is very good because there's some very specific things I will meditation, prayer, yoga, etc., for the purpose of making connection with what she calls God, divine consciousness, etc. Okay, so let's work at it this way. And again,
In your opinion.
okay, I'm going to give you my opinion, but I'm also going to give you according to the information in the case, right? So let's just take yoga as an example. There's lots of different kinds of yoga. There's the physical yoga, the devotional yoga, all this other stuff. Hatha yoga, Kundalini yoga, Bikram yoga, there's Ashtanga yoga. The body is not, the practice with the body per se doesn't make us more spiritual. It can help us to become more healthy, say, more flexible, more relaxed. It can help us create conditions so that the consciousness can do the work of the consciousness with, let's go to meditation. Meditation can take many forms. It can take classic forms of, let's say, sitting on a chair or cross-legged on the floor, whatever you like, including stand. I like standing meditation, Qigong standing meditation. Whatever meditation you like to do, that is going to be a practice that, with either just relying on your own inner self to teach you or getting good external teaching, and or both, then you're working on consciousness. Now, you can do yoga and bring consciousness into yoga, but it's not a matter of if you're going to do the plow or a back bend or anything else, that is going to improve your consciousness at all, per se. It's simply that can help to do what you're going to intend to do if it's for physical, to improve your conditions for your consciousness to expand, and you can do that while you're doing yoga, right? So it's not an either or thing, but per se, what we do, there are people who don't have that ability to do yoga or qigong or tai chi or anything else, but their consciousness is free within. We can also do yoga without doing yoga, can't we? If we decide, I'm going to sit here and visualize a particular posture or movement or something, and now you feel it, energy follows thought. So this is the meditational aspect of consciousness. And of course, through meditation, we can turn our attention to that more elevated connection with what you might refer to as the divine or whatever. Now, prayer is a whole different thing, because according to the information in the case, there's no deity, God, answering prayers. Now, just not to take on anybody's religion, but just let's use a little logic. We know that in the course of history, there have already been countless billions of people on this planet, very religious, praying away, ushered, probably trillions of prayers have been ushered to whatever the deity of choice is. How many of those have demonstrably been answered? We already know that if those prayers had been answered even thousands of years ago, certain peoples wouldn't even exist, because there were people praying, we want to grant us to kill our enemy. Prayer has been used for all sorts of things. So here's how and why, according to here, we're misdirected. If we're going to pray, there is what they call is the actual version of the real Lord's Prayer. So here's a good point to jump into the Emmanuel. So the 6 previous prophets, according to the information of the case, Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, we know these names from the biblical prophets. Emmanuel, the real human being upon whom the life of the never existed Jesus Christ was based. Wait a minute. Go to Isaiah 7:14 in the Old Testament. And his name shall be called Emmanuel. Go to Matthew 1:23 in the New Testament. It's all Jesus Christ. Up to 1:23 it's going, and his name shall be called Emmanuel. One was spelled with an E, one was spelled with an I. They used the J letter in the Talmud Emmanuel, the book that Meier co-discovered in 1964 in an abandoned, ancient tomb in Jerusalem, which contained, according to the information, the original teaching as taken down by the true scribe Judas, who was not the betrayer. The betrayer was a son of a Pharisee named Judah. Not Judah. A different name, Heriel, Scariel, different name. But that man did hang himself, for pieces of silver. Whoa, this is pretty heretical. Well, when the Talmud Emmanuel came out, a professor at Oregon State, James Deardorff, said, another Bible book, so I have this one. So he got a hold of the English translation, and about a year or two later, he comes out with a book called Celestial Teachings, and he says, the Talmud Emmanuel is the original writing of this man, Emmanuel, upon which the book of Matthew is based. It's not the other way around. It resolved over 325 inconsistencies in Matthew, 150 of which weren't even known at the time. It was either originally discovered, first published in German in 1978, or in English. And this is a whole other thing. And
Deerdorf then became somebody who really investigated the Meier case and the UFO element and all this stuff. Okay, whoa, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on here. So, Emmanuel had ushered what we could call the Lord's Prayer, except he didn't want anybody to pray to a Father in heaven because none such exists than this. He said, my spirit that dwells within me, you are omnipotent. Guide me today. And we probably have one of these things over here, you know what it is. So it was a prayer to our own spirit to awaken in us, awaken us to how this works, to unfold its energy and power in us, not to grant anything from outside ourselves. Now, one second. This is hard. I understand. I'm not religious, so I know that anybody that comes to this material who has a religious background, and let's face it, I think the majority of people that go into a religion do so because they have a sense of something greater, they want to do good, they want to be good. It doesn't mean necessarily that whatever and any teaching that a person gets or comes in contact with is the truth. You have to figure that out for yourself. And so what we're told in this case is, don't pray outside of yourself if for what you want, because with this whole self-responsibility, see things as they are, use the might of your thoughts, control your thinking. There's basic cornerstones that keep on bringing it back to us. We can issue that prayer to ourselves. We can then monitor and observe our thoughts, and we then have, see, we're very creative when we pray, we program things. Fine. What's the next step? The next step is that we become quiet, meditation, contemplation. You can meditate on anything you're doing. If you're working on something and you're fully present, observing, and you're conscious, and you're meditating, it's a form. Then we are starting to notice what comes. What is the cause and effect? Well, that some things come from outside of us, for better or for worse. Some things arise from inside of us. And you ever say, I really want to solve this in the Word, and then you get a quick glimmer, like, oh, it can't be that. Whoa. Then they'll say, knock, and the door should be open, asking you. Yeah, we're going to bring those things into our own consciousness. So it's really good to not gloss over an impulse, a silent little voice within it, even a little blip of something. It doesn't mean that it's the answer, but it means look at it, because then you're training yourself to not override, to not neglect the answer. We're so used to praying, waiting for something that basically, percentage-wise, never arrives. Unless it's through the might of our own thoughts and we just don't credit ourselves with that will and creation. So, if you're already able to pray, if you're already able to meditate, you're able to, if you choose to, test out, well, what happens if I ask that innermost teacher, that infinite wisdom that's already within me. And then if I meditate, if I listen for the impulses, the suggestions, whatever, from within as to how to, or something that says, look stuff up. I no longer dismiss anything. Sure, not everything leads me, but man, I just keep, I keep listening to keep doing it. And I can say in my own life, many things have changed that surprised me. I could not imagine that at this age, at that stage, that this circumstance was going to change and yield something, but I asked for it. I asked for nothing. You have to learn to.
No, the tape's about to end, and we're in front of a break.
Oh, okay, so the break is coming up. And then, are you still here so I can answer your question? Okay.
There's about a minute left on the feed.
Okay, so what I want to do is wrap it for right now, and we're going to have a break and music, food, I don't know whatever the story is.
I got just a yes or no question, real quick. Going back, did you say that the extraterrestrials came and to get information from Meier?
Okay, let me just say this, and we
Or
can
Meier
go.
was giving them information?
Let's just do this about the extraterrestrials coming to get information from Meier or give them information. The answer is actually both, and we're going to go into that more in the next thing. In other words, they brought him information that he did not have access to himself. He's not a scientist per se, and all that. And he, as a prophet, has access to spiritual teaching that they benefit from. There's more to go on this if you want.
But I want to thank you right now for sitting through all this.